Good evening. This is Changing Times, bringing you Otherworldly, the Wednesday show with speakers and topics to enlighten and enliven your night and open your eyes to hidden aspects of reality that many choose to not deny. Tonight, we got Sidney Eileen back, and she's going to be talking to us about life lessons from cats, including the dead ones, ghost cats. This is an exciting topic. I particularly like the idea of I have encountered spirits of cats, and as I said in response to a cartoon once, it was like, if dogs aren't going to heaven, then it can't be heaven. If there are no dogs, it's not heaven. So, and I could say the same thing about cats. So, yeah. If there's an afterlife, of course, the animals get it too. And as usual, if they want to come back and hang with us, bless them. So I guess that's it. What can I say? I'm going to put links up because the announcement goes away for getting in touch with Sidney Eileen. I think, yes, there they are. And I will put those in the chat. And if you're just listening to this on the YouTube channel, it's Sidney, SIDNEY, Eileen, EILEEN.com. Can you get easier than that? And the balancingpath.blog. So you should be able to find her later if you want more of her, and I certainly do. So that is always exciting to I was attracted because she's got attitude and isn't afraid to express it. So, and I love what you've done with your hair. We've redone it since the last show.
Yeah. I have to redo the color periodically because it washes out, but yeah. And it always changes, whatever colors we're in the mood for. So like Chief Khan said, I am Sidney Eileen, and I am a animistic witch who is also non-binary and asexual. I do use all pronouns. I have literally no pronoun preference. So it all works for me. So we're going to be talking about things that we can learn from cats. And we're using cats as an example because most of us have cats in our lives, but the sorts of things we'll be looking at are also something that you can do with any kind of an animal or animal spirit that you might encounter. Ghost cats are also great for talking about this kind of thing because I don't know about you, but I have encountered more ghost cats than any other kind of ghost out there, like even human ghosts. I have run into very, very few of those, only a couple in my life, but I've run into tons of ghost cats. And they always seem to know what they're about. They don't seem to need any help moving on. They're just doing their thing. They happen to be passed on from being embodied and just haven't moved on to the afterlife yet, but they will when they're good and ready. Whereas human ghosts that I've encountered, a lot of them have seemed kind of trapped and need to have a little help to be able to move on. But that's not always the case with them either. So this was inspired by a story that I posted online. So we'll start with a story of the first significant encounter I had with ghost cats. So back in 1999, I was just barely out on my own, and I was living with my older brother and my partner, and we heard a kitten crying outside of our window, and my brother ran outside and shooed a tomcat away from a tiny little kitten that was literally
yourself with your sweet
shirt.
Okay.
The palm of my hand. And brought her inside And the cat that we had at the time was a giant orange tabby. He was 22 pounds. He was not overweight at all. He was just that big. And he just decided, I'm going to take care of this tiny little kitten. And we brought her in. We named her 999 the Beast in honor of finding her on 9/9/1999. And we took her to the vet, and we thought she was maybe 6-7 weeks old by the size of her, but he said by her teeth, she was probably about 11 weeks and was that malnourished. So we got a clean bill of health at the time, but he warned us that being that malnourished might mean she had health problems later on. But we took her in, and she was just the sweetest, most adorable cat you could ever have. She was Velcro in laps. It was us, strangers, friends, didn't matter. If it was a human, she was Velcroed in their lap, and just the sweetest, most loving little gray tabby you could ever meet. And once she was in the house, we started noticing other cats, little kittens out of the corners of our eyes, mostly gray tabbies, but also an orange tabby. And you'd look and there wouldn't actually be a cat there. But it was easy at first to wonder, was it Dog? He was leash trained, so the orange tabby was named Dog. He went hiking, all sorts of things. He was great. Dog and Beast, and we would wonder, was I seeing the cat? But no, the orange tabby would be in the other room, or Beast would be in the other room. And we realized between the three of us, yeah, all of us are seeing all of these kittens, and they all grew at the same pace she did. And she would even play with them sometimes out of the corner of her eyes. And so we figured that all of those little cats were her litter mates that hadn't survived, and they had decided to stay with her while she transitioned. And over the course of the next few months, most of them moved on to the afterlife, but we continued seeing two of them in particular, one of the gray tabbies and the orange tabby stuck around, and we would still see them afterwards for the next few years. And unfortunately, as the vet predicted, she ended up developing a autoimmune problem that caused skin lesions and itchy rash. So we ended up giving her cortisone shots, and the vet warned us that she probably wouldn't live that long as a normal cat, because that much cortisone was really, or prednisone, sorry, it's one or the other, is really, really hard on their immune system, and that over time it would become less and less effective, but it increased her quality of life. So there was no contest, because she was just miserably itchy and rashy constantly. And she had a pretty good life with us. We made it as good as we could, and she ended up passing away at the age of 5 because the cortisone stopped working altogether, and she was just so miserable, and she developed digestive problems as well, and it was just tragic. So we buried her and moved on. And at the time, we ended up living in an apartment in San Francisco, and as a very expensive city to live in, especially if you want to have pets. So we couldn't afford to have any cats with us. So it was a few years before we had a cat again, my partner and I. And when we did, we got ended up with 3 more cats and lived with them and moved on. And over the course of the next more than a decade, did a bunch more moves. And eventually we came back around to living in the same area we had been living in when we met Beast. And when we did, we ended up going back to the same vet because we had really liked him. We had never found another vet we liked as much as that particular vet. So we went back to his practice with our now getting older cats that we had adopted after we were able to have cats again. And both of us felt a strange presence coming back into the vet's office, but we didn't say anything until we got back out to the car, and both of us were like, did you feel like something was watching us or someone? Like, yeah. And when we got back home, we started seeing a gray tabby and an orange tabby out of the corners of our eyes again. And we realized that Beast had not been ready to move on. And we had been staying at my partner's parents' place briefly before moving to San Francisco. And she didn't know that house, so she hadn't stayed there. And eventually she had made her way back to the vet's office that had been so good to her. I mean, he was one of those people where one of our other cats, Ringo, when we came back to his office after a several-year break, and he was also trained to be on a harness and a leash, so he wasn't in a carrier. And when the vet called his name, he just murked, hopped off the bench, and went straight into the exam room all on his own because he loved this vet so much. So she had made her way back to that vet's office, figuring maybe someday we'd show back up again. And so from there, she followed us home and stayed with us for about 6 months. And we realized that that orange tabby that had stayed with her throughout her whole life while the rest of her siblings ended up moving on, had stayed with her even after death and kept her company and followed her to the vet's office, and then came to our new apartment with us. And he ended up hanging out there longer than she did. After a few months, she went on ahead and moved on to the afterlife because she had said her goodbyes. And he stuck around for significantly longer before he too finally moved on. And it showed a level of loyalty that is honestly amazing to see. That he lost his life so young and stuck with his sister throughout her entire life and into her afterlife, and then even stayed a little bit longer before he was ready to move on. And so a couple years later, less time than I would have liked, we ended up losing all 3 of the cats that had been with us for those intervening years. One of them, she died of lung cancer. Ringo was probably a bit older when we adopted him anyway, and he had irritable bowel, and he was just he lived to a ripe old age in all likelihood, but we'll never know exactly how old he was. And then the third one, Oishi, less than a year after Ringo passed, we never did know exactly what he came down with, but within a week he went from very healthy to not with us. And that was really tough. But we contacted a local no-kill shelter that does really good work, and went on ahead and adopted some new cats. And one of the cats that we ended up adopting was this cute little orange tabby. And when I went in and was looking at the kittens, it was early in the spring, so there weren't that many kittens yet. And so I was checking around, and none of the cats, as I was looking at adult cats too, and none of them really clicked. And I was about ready to go when they said, oh, hey, we've got an orange tabby that came in just a couple days ago. He's in an intake area before he gets put in the larger area with the other kittens. Would you like to see him? He is kind of shy though, and we know you were looking for a bold cat. I'm like, oh, go on ahead and see him. And they pull him out, and he's this little scared orange cat. And they tell me, yeah, he was bonded with his brother, but his brother got adopted yesterday. And my heart just broke for the poor little guy, because there he is in this strange environment, having no idea what's going to happen to him. And his brother that he loved dearly got adopted the day before, and he doesn't know what happened to his brother or what's going to happen to him. And he's just obviously terrified and sad and depressed. And so I just took him in my hand and held him close, and he snuggled into me for a minute. And the volunteers at the shelter were like, he's actually cuddling you. And then when he went back in his cage, I just lifted him up and he went back in his cage. And I was like, I can't leave this poor little cat. he's just way too depressed, and he needs a home. And so I ended up bringing him home, and we named him Loki. And both my partner and I had the feeling like we knew him already. But we went through all of the cats that either of us had ever known in our lives, and neither of us, it just didn't feel right that he was a reincarnation of any of the cats that any of us had ever had previously. And it wasn't until I was doing a different podcast thing a couple months ago that, and I told this story in an abbreviated version, that I realized he was the orange cat that had followed his sister through her life and her death. And he must have decided to stick around longer because he wanted to see, do I want to be reborn here? And it was amazing to realize that, because we had always felt like we had met him before, but we couldn't pin down where. And honestly, it felt like a huge honor. He's amazing. He probably will not show up in my lap. He doesn't like the videos. I know some cats will get all in it. He'll look at me funny and then go the other direction when I'm doing one of these. He's such a sweetie. I post so many photos of him online, mostly on my Instagram account. But it's pretty amazing to me the way cats can navigate that transition between life and death with such dignity and composure. And I'm not going to say it's always easy, because I have had quite a few cats. And Isa, the one that had lung cancer, she was so angry that we couldn't make it better. I mean, incredibly angry that we couldn't fix it and that she had to go because we'd always fixed everything else. So but I don't blame her, because she was young. She was young and she wasn't ready to go. But I've also seen so many cats that, especially if they are ready to go, that just, there's so much grace and there's so much empathy and dignity about the way they handle that transition that is so hard for so many of us as humans, especially coming from a culture, Western culture, being so inept at dealing with grief and death, and the prevailing cultural themes that are so final, where the expectation is either there is nothing or there is an eternity of a very specific thing. And it isn't what I ascribe to or really have ever ascribed to. Even when I did consider myself Christian, I decided I believed in reincarnation because I decided paradise would be boring. Like no matter what was there, that paradise would ultimately be boring. I mean, it'd probably be a great vacation, but that ultimately it's the ups and downs and the contrasts in life and the working for things that makes the achievements and the good times so amazing. And without those things, you can't really appreciate what you have. But the life is a mixture of so many things, and that's what makes it so rich. And if it's paradise, you're not going to have that, because well, you don't want yelling and conflict and death and misery. And I'm not saying those things are good, but they're an essential part of life at the same time. And I figured and I totally got called a blasphemer for this when I was a little kid, but I was like, well, if God's good and you're bored, why wouldn't he let you be reborn, even if you then have to be rejudged when you die again? Like, cool, whatever. So that was my personal take on it, because it just didn't make sense to me that reincarnation wouldn't be real, because eternity is too much for anything. Nothing lasts for eternity. Life is constant change. There are little deaths constantly, because every time there's a change, it's a death. Every time there's a transition, there's a death. And I've always been animistic, so I see the spirits and the souls that are around us, and I see them come and I see them go, and you see some of them return, and it just, those absolutes just, they didn't mesh for me. But when you look at the way cats handle being dead, especially the portion of them that decide to stick around in this plane for a while, you see creatures that are very, very composed and know exactly where they are and exactly what they're doing and exactly what they want out of it. And so and it's nowhere near all cats that do that stay on this plane, because with the sheer number of cats there are in the world, if all of them did that, we would be overrun with ghost cats, like constantly. But we're not. But there are a lot of them. I will sometimes see ghost cats just wandering down a street, and I'm not one of those people who sees auras. I feel energies. It's a very tactile thing for me. I've never seen them. I can visualize, but that's different from actually looking at them. And I can sometimes perceive colors, but it's a weird sort of perception knowledge, not an actually see thing. And I don't always perceive colors. Most of the time I don't. I perceive like densities and kinetic and or calmness and that kind of thing. Things will feel thick or they'll feel thin. But ghosts, I'll actually see out of the corners of my eyes. And sometimes I'll see cats. And more often than anything else, other than, honestly, there's a road near where I live that in the morning and in the hour of the wolf, like if I'm there around dawn or if I'm driving that road in the middle of the night, I'll sometimes see ghost humans, most of whom look like they're probably from the 1800s. And I have no idea why there are so many of them. They'll just be standing by the side of the road, just kind of watching the cars go by. I'm like, I don't know what you dudes are doing. But that's the only place that I've ever consistently seen human ghosts, never at cemeteries. But the ghost cats I'll see everywhere. Yeah, and like unlike those humans that I see that seem stuck, they're doing their thing. And sometimes doing their thing is just, I wasn't ready to die yet. I'm going to keep acting like I'm alive and doing alive things. And it's until I'm ready to be dead and move to the afterlife. I've seen ghost cats that do that. I've talked to people who have had cat familiars who have passed on and then decided to stay around as a ghost to continue doing the work of a familiar. I haven't personally had that happen, but I have talked to quite a few witches who have had that sort of thing happen, which I think is really neat, because it wouldn't be that unlike having a ancestor. Well, it probably is unlike an ancestor. Anyway, it's to have those souls decide, you're important enough to me, I'm going to stick around.
very flattering.
Yeah, it really is. And as someone who attempted to do ancestor work and make those connections when I was much younger and constantly got the, yeah, don't bother feeling, nobody's coming, don't bother, do something else with your time. I find it really interesting that that is a dynamic that does happen for some people. And who knows, maybe it'll happen at some point down the road for me, but I'm not gonna hold my breath or count on it, just because different things are important for different people's paths, and that ended up not being critical for mine. But having the cats stick around is really cool, because they'll do some neat stuff around your place. They'll play with things, they'll move things, they'll I think they keep down the vermin a little bit, honestly. I think they scare them away. At least
when our cats are seem to be hunting or chasing something that we can't see, we say they're chasing poltermice.
yeah. Yeah, no, every living cat I have had has noticed things that I don't necessarily notice hanging out in the space.
You see it. You see them staring.
Yeah. But cats are very, very aware. You know, any animal is capable of being aware of any species. But like, if you look at humans, it's really not a large portion of humans that is inclined to pay attention, even if they do naturally notice those things. A lot of us humans will deny it, even if we do see it. And a lot of humans just straight up do not naturally see or notice those things. And they need a lot of specific training to be able to develop those abilities. So it's not a big portion. And when you're looking at cats, it's a significant portion that notices and pays attention to those things. But it's still not all of them. I have had cats that were lovely, amazing cats that I loved having around that obviously couldn't give two anything about it, and would just do their own thing. And they weren't concerned about what was there that was metaphysical or non-corporeal. They really weren't concerned with that. And then there are those that are like, I'm paying attention to everything. And I'm going to pay really close attention to what you're doing, which is my personal favorite theory on familiars, and why cats are so often the cliche familiar. Like, any animal can be a familiar, but there are a lot more cats that notice and pay attention to metaphysical and spiritual things. And when they have a person they love who is really into those metaphysical, spiritual things and is constantly working with energy and working magic and doing those things, they notice and they pay attention and they see how it's working, and they learn how to do it themselves, mostly by observation, and some of them with talent. So I honestly consider familiar cats in particular, but familiars in general that are actual embodied animals, to be fellow witches, spiritualists, that kind of thing. They're just not human ones. And they have learned how to do these things and decided, I want to aid this human that I love with these metaphysical things, which I think is absolutely amazing. And the amount of agency that gives to make that acknowledgement of the free will that's involved, and the interest and the love that's involved, is, I think, profoundly important.
Where do you fall on the Can Cats Read book?
Read books?
Yes.
I have never had a cat that I noticed read books, but I have had plenty of cats that watch television and seem to understand what was going on, even if it was something going on the screen that they had never seen in their lives. Issa, in particular, loved to watch anything where the actors were using or had British accents, like anywhere in the British Isles. didn't really matter. She loved it. If there was a show on that was produced by the BBC, she was going to be in a lap watching that show, glued to it the entire time. But books, I don't know. I've never encountered it, but that doesn't mean it's not possible.
Yeah, I'm just suspicious by some of the behaviors I've seen. So, but do you think that that spirit, soul might choose, since my takeaway on your stories is that cats have as much agency in the reincarnation cycle as we do?
I believe so, yes.
That some of us might do as many of us often threaten to do. Next time I'm coming back as a cat, because the cat's life is pretty cool. Do you think that this is something that happens, that sometimes that spirits might have the options?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. As an animist who believes in reincarnation and who spent a lot of time as a child thinking about this, like a crazy amount of time thinking about exactly this kind of topic. And also a lot of my connection to ancestry ended up not being your typical ancestor worship. It's more connecting with a sense of who I have been in past lives and what my path has been through the course of reincarnation. Not that I can really name names or would want to go, oh yeah, I was an Egyptian princess, or do that whole cliche. I've never done past life regression, but there are things that I know that I shouldn't have any knowledge of. And there are things that I will do or that make sense that there was no opportunity in this life for me to have learned those things. And that gives indications of where I have been before. And among those things is the impression that, yes, I have been reborn as various different kinds of animals at different points. But if you think about it, I think there are some souls that are particularly suited to being particular kinds of things or creatures, whether that's particularly suited to being human, particularly suited to being primates, particularly suited to being mammals, or land animals, or any animals, or maybe also plants or trees or rocks or oceans or things like that. Usually spirits of place and spirits of animal, I doubt there's much crossover, but I don't think it's impossible. But when we reincarnate over time, because of the nature of evolution, species change. Who humans are didn't exist millions of years ago. It wasn't an option for souls to be reborn as humans. And millions of years from now, we will probably be something else, maybe very similar, but still potentially something else. Give it billions of years and we will definitely be something else, because that's just how evolution works. And nothing, well, very few things stay static. Like crocodiles have been around for a crazy amount of time, so have sharks. So there are exceptions for longevity, but still at a point you go far enough back and there weren't sharks. And you go far enough in the future and the Earth will cease to be. And unless we have transplanted sharks to a different planet, there aren't going to be sharks anymore. So that means most of those animals, though, that are being reborn, that are constantly shifting, evolving species, if those souls are going to be reborn, they have to transit to a different kind of being. Even if they are particularly suited to being one thing. And then there are those souls that are not so picky, I guess, for lack of a better term. Like, honestly, gender is another good example of this that can just relate to human reincarnation. There are some souls that like to be reborn as female, and there are some souls that like to be reborn as male. I'm non-binary. I am positive I have been reborn with men, women, intersex, like all sorts of different genders, because every experience has value as far as I'm concerned. And
You like variety.
my soul appreciates having those varieties of experiences because variety is what keeps things interesting. Differences are what make life interesting. Diversity makes life interesting. So why wouldn't I want to experience things from different perspectives? I think that's amazing. I'm not gender fluid in this life. I'm not sure if I don't get the impression that's something I've done very often. But for people who are happiest being gender fluid, especially if that's part of their soul and not just their experience in the one life, are even more so like, I'm going to enjoy all of these perspectives and I want all of these perspectives. And I think that's amazing. And I see absolutely no reason that a soul might not go, I want to be a cat. I want to be a dog. And there are multiple religions around the world that if they believe in reincarnation and they believe in souls in multiple creatures, even if they don't go full animistic and see souls in objects and places, they'll still recognize that souls can be reborn as animals and animals can be reborn as humans, because the soul is different from that. And that's just the form it's embodied in to experience a single life. And each life doesn't have to be identical. But some souls love consistency and some value the spice of life. And there's nothing wrong with either approach.
I have a theory that perhaps if you you incarnated to learn a lesson and you somehow didn't manage, I kind of think of this, for instance, with people who grew up in abusive households. They had to learn to assert themselves, learn to forgive, learn to, whatever the lesson was.
I'm going to stop you there because
Okay.
having come from a problematic family, that wording, and I know you don't intend it to be callous.
Hey, if you can help me say it better, please. I want the instruction.
Yeah. And it is incredibly rare that a person needs those experiences or has to learn something from it. You always learn something from every experience you have. And some experiences are harder or easier than others. And those hard experiences tend to teach us stronger, harder lessons, or we get crushed under them. But the vast majority of the time, it's just happenstance. I don't think most souls really have that much control over where they go. Some, I think, do, but certainly not all of them. And with the massive proliferation of the human species and how many bad places there are to be born, there are going to be a ton of souls born in hard situations just because there are so many of them. And that doesn't mean those souls deserve those lessons. So when you get into wording of that kind of thing, when you put the emphasis on lessons they needed to learn, that implies that what they went through was something that needed to happen to them. And most of the time, that's not true. I have learned a great deal from the experiences I had and how I worked through them. But the value lies in me being able to grasp those things and be able to be myself in spite of where I came from. So, give me a sec. I mean, I understand what point you're trying to make, but it's a really, really easy, quick slide to, oh, well, they did you a favor because you got all these things out of it. A lot of people take it that direction. They really, really do. It's appalling how many people will take the sentiment of you learned from these experiences and go, oh, well, then you should thank them for teaching you those lessons.
That wasn't where I was going at all.
I know it wasn't. I know it wasn't. I understand that wasn't what you meant, but that is what that wording implies. That is where it gets taken more often than not, and it's not a good place to take it.
That comes awful close to blame the victim.
Oh, it is. It's total victim blaming, and it very much is used to excuse and prevent people from having to be accountable for what they've done. And in cases like mine, where it's best to not have any contact with the family later on in life, it's used to shame people into getting back in contact with toxic relatives, just because they're blood relations. And well, you needed that lesson, so you got a lot out of it. So why are you angry with them still? It's a whole
rascal.
yeah. And I know that's not what you meant.
No.
Yeah, but
I think we have agency between lives.
Yeah,
but I am just as willing to say, oh, these are my good friends and they happen to be together at this spot in the time frame. And I think I'm going to be their kid, and doesn't look and say, well, you've just been born in 1980 in Love Canal. Yeah. So,
and I do.
And then so he said, why does the baby choose that? And it's like, no, they didn't. They were thinking of something completely different. And
yeah, like having the agency to move across country because you think you're going to have something better, and things go sideways in ways you didn't even expect and couldn't have planned for. And I do think a lot of people are reborn knowing the same souls over and over again. If people like each other, why wouldn't they want to be reborn to know each other again? And I very much believe that.
And many of these stories about reincarnation indicate people are chasing old friends around the time stream and all over the world.
And sometimes you meet up perfectly and you're the same age, and sometimes it's like, oopsie, they're 50 years older or younger than me, but we can still be friends for the time we overlap. And different kinds of relations, life to life, whether it's blood relations or friends or co-workers or fellow creatives or fellow spiritualists, or all sorts of different ways to connect with people.
But I like the idea that animals have the same agency.
Yeah.
And I like the respect. I read I gravitate toward this kind of literature. Somebody was doing they were counting animals up in the Arctic, and they'd gotten dropped off with their stuff, and they found themselves they were seeing and counting animals, and he spoke to somebody that came to him, and he said he had somehow wandered into, this is the other world where animals go in between the times when the reindeer is killed, and then this is the place where before they go back and become another animal. And but the native who told him that said, we're not getting as many of the animals because the hunters are not thanking them when they kill them anymore, and they just don't want to get back into that cycle. And the sacred interaction between a person and the meat he ingests, that story, I will never forget it. I would be really helpful if I could remember what the source was so I could tell people. But yes, I think we need to relate to any beast we choose to eat, and treat them with more respect. I do think we can be animals if we choose. I don't think it's a, if you're more advanced, you become a human. It's like,
No.
no.
How are we more advanced? We can build technology.
Yeah.
On a spiritual level, I mean, that just ascribes to this, that the whole idea of the hierarchical building up to apex human is just such an ego trip.
That's the way I feel about it.
Yeah.
This is, of course, why I'm such a Sidney Eileen fangirl. So have you written anything interesting that I may have missed?
Haven't been writing. I haven't posted anything in about a month. I've got a sigil I need to do up, but the past month has been weird. The COVID vaccine, frankly, kicked my ass. It really did a number on my chronic symptoms, because I do suffer from chronic illness, and it knocked me for a loop. And I'm still having a lot of trouble. I'm having a lot more seizures and things like that are making it very difficult to do much of anything lately. But I do really want to get back to doing the writing. I'm really hoping I can manage that by the end of the month and start writing again regularly, because it was really, really good for me, and it gave me a nice outlet, because I've been mostly housebound since I became disabled in 2011. And so yeah, 10 years now. It's nice to have an outlet and something to do. And it feels really good to get things out. So yeah, I really, really want to, as soon as my body will let me focus enough to be able to write some things up. I'm not done. I'm also, I've been restructuring my website. I've added all of my old articles to my personal website so they can be read without the advertisements that are all over Pathos. And that's where I'm going to be posting stuff from now on, because some other things happened that are unrelated to my illness that just necessitated that change. So we'll see what happens. And I'm not sure what the next article will be. It depends on what inspiration strikes. I have a laundry list of topics that I want to write on still.
Yeah, but now we can go back and read the old ones.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah, and they're indexed better, so you can find them, and you can actually search my website to find them and not get lost in a sea of articles. So
allow me to say thank you, because better organization it's a pain in the tush to do it.
It took a couple weeks.
So allow me to say that one of your fans is going to appreciate that a lot.
I appreciate that. It was actually nice that the timing worked out that way, because I didn't have the mental capacity to be writing anything new. So instead I was working on transferring everything over, getting it looking nice, updating links and that kind of thing. I'm still not quite done with the sigil section, because I want to make up new graphics that have better descriptions for the older sigils, but almost done with it.
We're getting kind of toward the end. Can I ask people if they have any questions?
Absolutely.
Or stories of ghost cats or beloved cats that they wanted to share?
Oh, Jenny has a kitty in her lap.
Yes, this is Toaster. We adopted her when she was 7 years old, and the woman who had her before had adopted her as a kitten. And she was 16 years old herself at the time. She had had many kittens named Fluffy and Muffy and all sorts of cutesy things like that. They had died horrible deaths.
Oh.
Decided she had to go a different direction with this one, named her Toaster. Japanese bobtail.
I remember a reading that Jen did. There was a period where she was doing.
I began talking to animals after my heart rat Lola died. And Lola has been joining us on the meeting here. She's on my left shoulder.
And the one that, like I said, that stuck in my mind was one where the owner was looking for closure because they had accidentally locked the cat in the attic and it died there.
Oh.
And the thing that I took away from it was how matter of fact the cat was about the whole thing. It was, well, yeah, that sucked royally, but what are we going to do? You know, tell her to get over it.
Shut up about it.
So yeah, you learned a lot from just a handful of readings. And of course, Toaster, well, she's kind of tuned into me these days because I've done a lot of, I've worked in healthcare, and like Jen, I took a Reiki attunement many years ago. And when she's not feeling good, she likes to come up, and if I'm resting because I'm in bed, she'll come up and snuggle up to me in exactly the same way every time. And if I don't move, she won't move either. But we just sit there and kind of soak up the vibe. And I feel like I'm doing something for her that way. It doesn't make her any nicer when she's hungry and starts meowing at me.
Yeah, well, the reason she's on my lap right now is it's about 10 minutes to 9. At 9 o'clock, the alarm goes off and I take my pills, and then we go to bed. And they get treats at bedtime. But yeah, I began communicating with animals when my heart rat Lola died in my arms. And it was very upsetting for me. But
Yeah.
she actually made contact with another rat that was going to be available shortly from the place we had adopted other rats from, in New Hampshire, in the New Hampshire area, Maine Rat Rescue. And it was a near duplicate of Lola herself, who was a blue Dumbo. And just, Lola was the sweetest thing. She was my love.
And she's been up there at the bridge. Every time we lost another one, Jen would always see them coming out of this mist to where Lola was standing.
Well, what I see is in front of me is kind of a train station, the depot at a train station. And Lola's over there with all the companions she's pulled together that are already there. And the last time we actually had a rat put down at, no, not the last time, but one time we had a rat put down at a veterinary hospital. And as we were walking out to the car, I saw the newly deceased rat walk across from behind me onto the depot. I saw the very moment of passing. But Lola does that for us. She's there. And I made contact with her before the meeting started here, and she's been sitting on my left shoulder this time.
It sounds like Lola's a psychopomp.
Yeah, she is.
Lola's a what?
A psychopomp. It's a person or animal who can guide the dead.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
I guess that she is then.
Yeah, she is very much that.
I called her in on behalf of pets from people in other states to be there and help them.
It's important work because
Yeah.
some souls have a
Oh,
very
yeah.
hard time with it.
I haven't been active in that like I could because we just don't contact. We're not in contact with many people.
Right. But I remember, wasn't Lola the one that was in that 20-gallon fish tank at the pet store? And she practically catapulted herself out of the tank into your arms?
Yes. She was 5 months old. We went to the pet store thinking we might get another rat to keep company with our older rats. And they had one for adoption in this tank. And she was 5 months old. They took the lid off, and I took her out and cuddled her and let her go back in the tank. And she jumped back out on my arm, on my chest, and she jumped back in the tank and jumped back on my chest and jumped back in the tank. And it was clear we weren't going out without her.
Yeah.
So, and ever since, I'm sure I must have been communicating with animals all along because I've always been very natural with training dogs and talking to cats and everything. But it was when Lola passed that I began talking to them.
Yeah, that was a real shock to the system for you.
Talking to dead animals, talking to living animals. I was on Ravelry at the time, which is the knitting website, and a bunch of people started asking for readings, and I talk to dogs in Finland. I talk to cats all over the place. It's interesting. Some cats know English or whatever language. Some cats speak in images or scents or textures or all of the above. And it's really interesting the different personalities I contacted too. Some of them are very proper and you almost speak with an English accent.
Well, they're each unique beings. So you can make generalities and you can say general things, but there will always be exceptions because of individuality.
Exactly.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about it.
Well, that's why we so much appreciate your talk tonight, because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, oh yeah, well, been there, done that. Oh, I know exactly how that worked out, you know. So we're all just, because it's been like that with us for ages now.
Oh yeah, I'm 60 years old. My childhood cat is still in my mother's house.
Yep.
Sometimes they'll just, I mean, like the little orange tabby sticking around for his sister through her entire life. I mean, cats are very social creatures. I think mainstream society doesn't give them enough credit for that, but they have no tolerance for people who disrespect them. Mm-hmm. So that's where the reputation for being aloof and unloving comes from. But when they're loved and they find family, they are so profoundly social and loyal. Mm-hmm. And they will absolutely stick with their family through everything. Yeah. And some of them will decide, I don't want to go to another life. I'm going to stick around because I want to remember this one and I'm going to stay through all of it. And I'm not going to go until they go.
Yep. And that's been my thought, is I can think of exactly, what was it, Max? Or which one's the one that's still in the house?
No, Mike. You never knew
Mike. I never knew Mike, but yeah, Mac. But I think Mike's going to stay there until Mom goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my partner's parents had a cat that was originally ours, but because of the move to San Francisco, and he fell absolutely in love with her dad. And so he ended up staying with them for the rest of his life. And when he passed as an elderly kitty, he did kind of stick around. And I used to see him every once in a while around the yard for about 2-3 years, but I haven't seen him in a little while at this point. But he didn't want to go immediately, even though he was very ready to die when it came time, because he'd been sick for a while. He ended up with kidney disease. Mm. And but he wasn't ready to move on entirely, even though he was ready to let go of that embodied life. Yeah. And honestly, thinking about it, I still feel like he's probably around somewhere and hasn't entirely moved on yet, but I'm not sure what he's up to or why he decided on that. I don't have to know, only he has to know.
Yep.
So.
Well, we are coming to the end here, and I want to thank everybody for coming and sharing. I would ask everybody to tell your friends about Changing Times, Changing Worlds. Remind people that we are virtual this year. We're just being really careful because some people aren't getting their shots. And the conference is going to be on Zoom November 8th to the 14th, Monday through Friday evenings, and all day long Saturday and Sunday. And so please join us on Facebook, tell people about, people who want to find out the kind of things we talk about, like this. These get posted on YouTube by someone who is more tech savvy than I am. So I push the button, I say, we're recording now, and then they take care of the tech part. I'm trying to learn, but I have talents in other areas. It would be greedy for me.
You just gave yourself away as a pet owner too, because you didn't say, some people, you didn't say got vaccinated, you said had their shots.
Yep. I didn't even notice.
I have this weird mind that picks up on stuff like that. But so I say, I don't tell people I got vaccinated, because I've even got this spiffy sticker from the state of New York to display. And
I got a little button, which any anti-vaxxer can get one for $12. So there you go.
But it's not like I've had my shots. Yeah.
No, I'm glad I got my